look, we're back again. Story time. We are back to The Farthest Away Mountain, picking up with chapter 11. Dakin had been flying through the air, carried by this horrible creature, and was about to be dropped back on the little cabin that she was in before. This is titled Croak Again. Whoosh! Down the chimney she dropped, as smoothly as a letter falling into a letterbox. As she landed in the fireplace, she heard the clash of the monster's talons clawing at the roof and saw its shadow flash across the dusty window. Its angry cries circled the cabin once or twice and then faded away back up the mountain. Breathing hard, Dakin looked around. Everything was exactly as she had last seen it. There was the pool in the middle with the lily pads, and oh joy, there was dear old Croak sitting on one of them with his fingers in his ear holes and his eyes screwed tight. Dakin was taking no chances this time. Creeping up to him very quietly, she reached her hand out and gently but firmly caught him in it. He jumped and quivered, but she held him, and after a moment he cautiously peeped at her. Then he took his fingers out of his ears at once. "Oh, it's you!" he said in a tremendous relief. "I thought I heard, oh dear, what a terrible fright I got." And he lay down on his back in her hand, his hands clasped to his chest, palpitating all over. "Now, Croaky dear," said Dakin firmly, "there's no need to carry on like that. Nothing can get in here. Surely you found that out. Now do sit up, because I want to talk to you. Here, have a nice fly. You'll feel much better." The cabin was abuzz with them. She caught one easily as it blundered against the window pane and popped it into Croak's open mouth. He gulped it down and immediately sat up. "What a kind little miss you are, to be sure," he said. "I'm so glad to see you again. Of course, I knew you wouldn't get far, but I didn't think you'd ever actually come back. I cried a lot about you after you went, you know. Quite scared you'd be killed. Well, never mind. So you decided to be sensible after all, then, and not go on." "Well, of course I went on," said Dakin indignantly. "And I did get far. I got to within sight of the summit, as a matter of fact." Old Croak's eyes popped out. "You got where?" "Nearly up to that big rock, like an ogre's castle." "What do you mean, like an ogre's castle?" cried Croak, jumping about in excitement. "It is an ogre's castle. It's Dracomag's castle, you foolish, rash little girl. Oh, my goodness gracious me, and what about the spikes, and the witch, and her snow, and what about the gargoyle brothers? Oh, I can hardly believe it, right to the top she got. Oh, tell me everything, I can't wait to hear." He had fallen off her hand, and was jumping about madly all over the cabin, tumbling into the pond every now and then, and jumping out again. "Do sit still, Croaky," said Dakin. "How can I talk to you when you're bouncing about like that? I promise I'll go away without telling you a thing if you don't stop it." So in the end, the frog had to sit still on the palm of her hand while she told him all of her adventures, right from the very beginning, even the part about wanting a prince as her husband. He was certainly a most wonderful audience, except that he kept interrupting with exclamations. "Good heavens, fancy you guessing that, and what did he say? And how did you get out of that? Oh my goodness gracious me." The end part about the winged one carrying her off had him absolutely on the edge of her hand with suspense, with his eyes wide and both his tiny hands in his mouth. "Oh, I do think you're brave. Oh, I do think you're brave," he said at last. "You wonderful girl. Oh, you did deserve to get there. You did. He was nearly in tears. "It's too bad, that rotten Gras coming out and spoiling the end of the story." "But it's not the end," said Dakin. "What?" "It's not the end? How could it be?" said Dakin. "I haven't solved any of the mystery yet. I don't know why the mountain called me. I haven't helped the gargoyles. And there's that awful ogre still up there, frightening everybody. Not to mention the witch, and Gras, as you call the brute. Oh, don't I owe that Gras something for bringing me down here again? Just wait till I catch him. Because now I've got to climb all the way up again. And even though I do know some of the secrets now, it's still an awfully long way." Old Croak sat there staring at her for a long time. "You're going back up there?" he asked at last. "Of course," said Dakin. Croak flopped off her hand and jumped slowly across the cabin and back, muttering to himself. Never would have believed it. Never saw anything like it. Such determination, such courage. Amazing, amazing. Dakin, knowing he must mean her, tried not to listen. After a while, she said, "Though now I think about it, there is one good thing about coming back here again, and that is that now I can bathe in the pool. This is the Lily pool, isn't it?" "The what?" "Oh, yes, yes, of course. Go ahead, my dear. Help yourself. You're very welcome, I'm sure." Dakin didn't fancy getting herself all wet, but it couldn't be avoided, so she sat on the edge of the pool with her legs dangling in. The water was surprisingly warm. Took the book out of her pocket and then slipped in. Her feet didn't touch the bottom. She swam around once. It took about half a minute, and then prepared to pull herself out again. Croak was watching her critically. Not good enough," he said. "Gotta do it properly." And without warning, he jumped onto the top of her head. She got a bit of a fright when he landed on her and ducked right under. And when she popped up again sputtering, Croak, still sitting on her head as calmly as he could, remarked, "That's more like it. Now you're fully protected," and jumped ashore. "Now go outside," he said. "Run about the meadow and get dry. Can't have you catching cold, can we? That would never do." He was looking at her with a very strange expression on his froggy face. She was about to get the rope ladder down to climb out when he suddenly said, "Just a minute." She turned. "One or two small things before you go." "Yes?" "Well, first of all, I'm not really a frog." "If you're not a frog, what are you?" "I don't know. No, don't laugh. It's true. I've forgotten what I once was. A man of some kind, probably, since I still have the gift of speech, but who changed you? Drakemag?" No, of course not. Drakemag's an ogre, not a wizard. He can't do things like that. He's just a huge giant, a brute, a lout, and a bully. And the witch herself is harmless. She puts all her witchcraft into her colors, and the only thing she's afraid of is white." "So who could it have been? Not the gargoyles? I won't believe that." "No, not them, of course. They're as much victims as I am." "Are there any other witches up there?" "I believe not. I've never heard of any." "So there's someone or something else, someone wicked some wicked force behind all of this." "That's always been my idea." They were silent for a moment, looking at each other. "I must go and get dry," said Dakin. "I'm shivering." She started to go, then turned back once more and kissed the frog. It was as if she knew she wouldn't be coming back. I think we have time for one. Okay, let's read chapter 12. Up the mountain. Out in the meadow, she raced back and forth for a while. The sun and wind dried her so quickly that she realized the water was magic. What had Zog told her about it? That it had the power to repel evil. In that case, she had nothing to worry about, other than natural accidents, such as falling down a mountain, for instance. Well, suddenly, a white something caught her eye on the edge of the wood. She ran up to the trees. High on a branch, she saw her stocking cap. "I must get that back," she thought. "I really must." The tree itself, which had stolen the cap from her head, as she supposed, was impossible to climb, but the one next to it was not so bad. After a long, tiring struggle, Dakin managed to get nearly to the top of it, and by reaching over, was just able to get her hand on the white woolen cap. It was another matter to pull it free, for the tree it was caught in seemed to be holding on to it. Twice Dakin nearly fell off. But at last she wrenched it off, and with one arm around the trunk of her tree, fitted it securely onto her head. She had been so much occupied she hadn't noticed that her struggle in the treetops had been seen by sharp eyes far away. But now a heavy dark shadow fell on her, a shadow that filled her with a far from ordinary chill. Her face snapped up. Yes, it was Gras, swooping close above her, his dreadful claws opening to snatch her again. "Aha," thought Dakin, even as the shadow fell on her. "Now I've bathed in the Lily pool. You won't be able to harm me." But she was in for a shock. Either the Lily pool water didn't work, or something else was wrong, because no sooner had she thought this than the great creature clamped his claws on her shoulders and flew off with her again. Dakin started to scream as she felt the claws, but then she stopped because, although they seemed to be digging into her, she suddenly realized they weren't hurting. She felt herself firmly held, and when she looked, she could see the terrible claw nails, as sharp as daggers, pressing through her clothes. But they certainly weren't going through her skin. Maybe that's what the lily pool does, she thought, as well as she could think for the wind whipping her hair around her face and snatching breath out of her mouth. It may be like a magic suit of armor that stops you actually getting hurt if someone tries to hit or shoot an arrow at you or something. But I see it doesn't stop monsters from picking you up. Well, she added to herself, perhaps it's not such a bad thing if only it doesn't drop me, because it's taking me straight up the mountain again to the lair of its master Dracamog, which is where I wanted to go in any case, and it's saving me all that long climb. It was all very well to be so calm about it and look on the bright side and so forth, but when the great, dark, rocky bulk of Dracamog's castle, which was the summit of the mountain, loomed ahead of her and the Terrible Gras began circling it in great sweeps, Dakin began to feel very frightened indeed. It really was a most awful looking place. The turrets of the castle were no more than pinnacles of rock, which had been hollowed out from inside and rough windows cut through. These looked like so many caves. They weren't proper square windows, so that if you didn't know, you wouldn't think it was an ogre's castle at all. But flying close around them like this, Dakin could peep in as they passed one of those openings, and inside she could see cave-like rooms with huge bits of rough furniture, tables and chairs, the legs of which were whole tree trunks, and the tops like the decks of ships. A candle so thick Dakin couldn't have got her arms around it, and in the kitchen, a fireplace as big as Dakin's whole house, half filled with twigs that were the tops of trees, and a black cook pot in which you could have cooked a couple of bullocks without even chopping them up first. All these rooms were dark and gloomy, and Dakin thought with horror that she might soon find herself inside, in the power of Dracamog. She could have wished herself safely at home, and she certainly would have had she not met the Gargoyle brothers and old Croak, who needed help so badly. How could she possibly help them? She had no idea, but all of them had said that she could, and after all, the mountain had called her. She had no more time to think about it now, though, because Gras had reached the front of the castle for the third time around and was now flying with her into the vast mouth of the cave. It was dark in there, so dark that Dakin kept blinking to make sure her eyes were really open. Gras flapped slowly on until they must have been right in the heart of the mountaintop. Then, quite suddenly, just when she least expected it, he dropped her. Time to stop